Hey everyone, welcome back to another Tuesday morning of Reading with Raptors here at the University of Minnesota Raptor Center. I am here reading in our program room with our resident barn owl. I thought that we would talk a little bit about the weather we've been having up here in Minnesota. I know a lot of folks all across towards the East Coast as well have been having a lot of, which is In the Snow, Who's Been Here by Lindsay Barrett George. There's been a lot of snow that suddenly popped up now that we're officially into winter, so I figured we'd talk a little bit about that. I also know a lot of people get very interested in what we do with some of our more warmer weather birds that aren't normally here in Minnesota, either most of the year or during the winter. So since this barn owl has spent the last couple nights indoors because of the cold temperatures, that should be a great fit for talking about kind of what we do with some of the birds during the winter as it gets a little bit chilly out, and especially when we get some of those really big stormy blizzard kind of events. So as we go along, as always, people have questions that they want to put in the chat, feel free. Otherwise, we'll get started reading here. Right now, I had a couple of little pieces of rat that she got, so she's maybe looking for some extras. So we'll talk about our barn owl as we go along. Otherwise, we're going to read about looking for some signs out in the snow. Hopefully some of you have gotten a chance to get outside and see some of those great animal tracks and signs that we can see so well during the winter, which is always really exciting. So this is In the Snow, Who's Been Here by Lindsay Barrett George. Here's the first page right away. Has this nice, really big picture of a couple of chipmunks with a couple of little seeds down here at the bottom. Back up a little bit. There we go. It is cold and quiet on this winter morning. Cammy, do you want to go sledding on the hill by the old school? William asks. Sure, Cammy says. Mom says we can put out some corn for the animals on the way, William says. So there's this beautiful kind of forest that they're walking into. There's a dog following them. Looks like they have some seeds that they can leave out for birds and other kind of woodland animals, walking out in these big snow suits. Looks pretty similar to what I know I've looked like outside lately, all bundled up. The children walk up the lane and cross the township road. They follow an old trail into the woods. Cammy stops to throw corn on the ground. William sees tracks between some barberry bushes. Who's been here? So here you can see these bushes. You see some kind of tracks on the ground. They're setting up the corn. Love the dog's big fluffy paws. So who's been here? Sorry. A ruffed grouse. You can see a ruffed grouse who's maybe in those thorny bushes, maybe eating some of those seeds or taking shelter, leaving some big kind of fluffy marks from its wings and these big feet. So there's a ruffed grouse in the bushes. Let's see what else they find. William and Cammy hike up a small hill. They hear a bird's song. Wheat, wheat, wheat. The children reach a clearing in the woods. The bird is gone. Fuzzy red balls sprinkle the snow under a clump of sumac. Who's been here? There's that sumac tree with the big fuzzy red berries. Children are finding them underneath it. Who's been here? A cardinal. You can see the cardinal using that big kind of triangle beak, perfect for cracking into the little seeds on this big sumac tree. Cardinals and other kind of finch-like birds have these big triangular beaks that are perfect for cracking into those seeds. So oftentimes you'll see the remains of the seeds on the outsides. The trail winds along the frozen pond. William and his sister look up into the branches of an old oak tree. They see a leafy nest. Who's been here? You can see this big tall tree, and at the top, I'm sure a familiar sight to a lot of us, you can see this big leafy kind of ball up here. What is that? Who's been here? It's a family of gray squirrels. You can see there's one over here on the side and then a few tucked in among these big leaves all clumped together in this nice little nest. You can see them keeping nice and toasty warm for the winter. The children pass a hemlock tree. Freshly cut and gnawed branches lie at the bottom of the tree, but there are no footprints. Who's been here? Here you can see this nice hemlock is kind of this almost conifer, kind of piney looking tree. It's got all these branches down here on the bottom near the kind of cracked bark down here, but no footprints. Who's been here? A porcupine. Porcupines usually are living up in the trees instead of walking around down on the ground, eating a lot of those branches, nibbling off the best tender pieces. So there's a porcupine making that big mess at the bottom of the tree. Pretty comfy barn owl behind us, kind of foot tucked up, kind of closing her eyes a bit. Speaking of, let's put the rest of the corn under that white pine tree, Cammie says. They spread the corn and find a pellet of feathers and bones at the base of the tree. Who's been here? I'm sure some of us can actually guess this one. You can see this little bundle of fur and bones down there. Who's been here? A great horned owl. You can see that great horned owl. I love this picture because it is kind of finishing casting or making, kind of coughing back up that pellet. So there's that pellet right after that great horned owl finished casting it or egesting it or coughing it back up. All mean the same thing. I love this picture too because you can see those giant feet and those talons. Big round facial disc up here, this round face. And of course that big curved sharp beak having just been used to cast up that pellet. I actually pulled out one. People who haven't seen these before. Here's what one actually looks like. This is from a great horned owl. You can see it has that rat skull in it. You can see the top of the skull is here, and underneath are kind of all the jaw bones and other bones put together with all the fur. William stops the toboggan. He sees a small hole in the snow. It is the entrance to a tunnel. Broken acorn shells surround the hole. Who's been here? Here you can see the little bits of seeds and acorns, the little hole in the snow. I know sometimes I see a lot of those when I'm out in the woods. Who's been here? A chipmunk. You can see the chipmunk with the little acorn that's maybe cracking open with those big rodent teeth. Perfect for chewing on things. William and Cammie follow the trail down to the brook. They see tracks going in and out of the water. William finds a fish head on the bank. Who's been here? You can see this beautiful forest with this nice little stream passing through. Must have some very good fishing in there. There's that nice fish head, but who's been there? A mink and a trout. Some very good fishing in that little stream. So here's that trout and there's that mink. Maybe fished it out of the water and is eating it. Mink is kind of like, it's in the weasel family. So it's kind of a very large cousin of the weasel. They have this really nice, big, fluffy, plush fur that they use for keeping warm so they can be hunting outside all winter long. A clump of birch trees grows along the trail. A patch of bark has been rubbed off of one of the trees. Who's been here? Here you can see the bark being rubbed off of, or has been rubbed off of some of those birch trees. I love our more domesticated animal here, this dog, who's maybe been chewing on a branch in the meantime. who's been here? Who's causing this rubbing? A buck or a male deer with those big antlers, maybe marking the territory, alerting other deer by rubbing its head up against the bark. I love how they do the fur in these pictures. These animals, the fur looks so soft. You can even see this kind of whirl of fur in its ear to keep it nice and warm. Ugh, love that art. The trail passes through a gate in a stone wall and ends in an open field at the top of the hill. We're here, William says, and it's a long way down. Cammy finds a toboggan with a thermos of hot chocolate, 3 cups, and some donuts. I wonder who's been here, she asks, but William knows. Here you can see our 2 children and that toboggan with all those goodies on it. Looks like there's somebody creeping up from the woods, sneaking up. Who could it be? Looks like a parent has come to join the kids and the dog to go sledding. So even us people are leaving signs out in the woods sometimes. Looks like these folks are gonna have a fun time sledding. So it's the last page is them all joining up together to go sledding. Here's one more page that has a little bit of extra info in this last beautiful picture of these woods. Looks like some beautiful kind of afternoon winter light. So here's this page that shows some kind of close-ups of these. So I'll read these. So some more information on some of the animals that our kids found in the woods. The ruffed grouse is a plump bird with short wings. Its flight is quick and erratic, meaning it kind of moves around kind of unpredictably. Grouse like to live in overgrown fields with shrubs and woods nearby. They eat insects, berries, seeds, leaves, and buds. During the winter, barberries are a favorite food because the berry's high oil content helps the grouse maintain its body temperature. Pretty clever. The cardinal is a shy bird that likes open fields next to thickets or evergreen trees. It has a strong beak, which is used for cracking open seeds and pits. Both the male and female cardinal guard their home territory all year long. The male cardinal's feathers are much brighter than the female's. So the bird we saw earlier in the book, this bright red cardinal, is probably a male. Gray squirrels make their winter homes in the tops of tall trees. They love to eat acorns and other nuts, seeds, and berries. Squirrels prepare for winter by burying nuts and seeds in holes that they dig in the ground. If they forget where their food is hidden, trees often will sprout from the undiscovered spots. So our gray squirrels are doing a great job of planting some trees, even if it's on accident. The porcupine spends the winter in the tops of trees. It prefers heavily wooded areas, especially those where evergreens grow. For food, the porcupine strips bark from tree trunks and branches. It is very slow moving, but its sharp quills protect it from other animals. So those porcupines are covered in those very specialized hairs that are called quills that are very sharp and pointy. Great protection. The great horned owl lives in heavily wooded areas. It hunts at night and feeds mostly on small animals. The owl is a good hunter with keen night vision and extra sensitive hearing, and it flies almost noiselessly. It swallows its prey whole, flesh, bones, and hair, and later spits up pellets or balls made of everything that could not be digested, which for owls means the bones and the hair or the fur. The chipmunk is a small member of the squirrel family. Chipmunks like to eat nuts, seeds, and fruit. They spend the winter in vast systems of underground tunnels. On a warm winter day, this chipmunk has taken acorns to the surface to eat in the sun. The mink spends most of its life swimming or running through streams and the edges of lakes and ponds. It is active at night and is seldom seen by humans. Minks like to eat small animals, birds, eggs, frogs, and fish. The trout is a favorite food because of its tiny scales, which makes it easier to eat, and its high fat content, which helps the mink stay warm in winter. Those are large kind of weasel relative. And then finally, in the fall, this buck or male deer rubs the bark from a young birch tree to mark its territory. Marking helps to keep other bucks away and to attract does or female deer. Sometimes a buck will also stab a sapling with its horns as practice for future fights. So some multi-purposing from our buck who is making the markings on that tree. So this has been In the Woods, Who's Been Here by Lindsay Barrett George. I think we also read, probably a few months ago, back in the fall, when we read In the Woods, Who's Been Here, another kind of book in this series. I don't think as of the publishing of this one that there were any more, but I'm gonna keep an eye out for some more because I think the art style is just beautiful, and learning about all those kind of secret signs that animals are leaving out in the woods is really cool, especially now that it's the winter time. It makes it a little bit colder, maybe fewer animals to see, either because a lot of animals like many birds have migrated, or because some of our smaller mammals are hibernating. But that nice covering of snow for those of us up north where we get lots of snow can make it kind of easy to spot those tracks or see the signs left out by maybe small animals eating seeds, things like that. So the seeds that were being eaten by the cardinal or the chipmunk, leaving all those little signs out is a little bit easier to spot during the winter with the snow. I saw a few comments about how relaxed this barn owl is. She is, I'll try to turn the camera a little bit. I don't want to disturb her too much. But something that you don't often get to see with barn owls up close when people are around is that when they do kind of relax. So right now she's got her foot tucked up. Her breathing's really slow and relaxed. Eyes are kind of shut. Is when they're really relaxed like this, the kind of middle of their facial disc, kind of across the top of their beak, kind of opens up a little bit in a way that you don't normally get to see in too many pictures. So I can actually see there's an extra kind of layer of feathers underneath there that help form that facial disc shape that you don't normally get to see. So I'll see if at some point I can maybe turn the camera a little bit more so you can see into there, but you can see a little bit, that little brown line across the top of her face. That's actually the rest of her facial disc. It actually comes down kind of over the top of her beak to make that incredible facial disc kind of shape that's helping to funnel sound towards her ears. So she has big holes for her ears, kind of at the, behind her eyes, kind of where that facial disc kind of swoops outwards. That's about where her ears are, underneath those kind of stiff feathers. So all of that is really just showing you how kind of complicated the arrangement of feathers are on her face that are really helping her do that important job of hearing really well. So a couple of questions that are coming in. Do all kinds of owls make pellets? Yes, actually all raptors make pellets. So what these birds will do is they often are eating whole prey, or when they're ripping their food into pieces using that curved, sharp beak, they're usually eating all the parts of the animal. Usually eating bones, the fur, the eyeballs, the meat, the organs, all of the good stuff, right? Now, some of that stuff is kind of hard to break down, even in really strong stomach acid. So most daytime raptors, like hawks and falcons and eagles and vultures, actually have strong enough stomach acid to break down bones. So when they produce pellets, it's just the tough outer covering like fur or hair or feathers or fish scales. Whereas owls, their stomachs aren't quite as strong as that. So even though it's important that they eat the bones, they can't fully dissolve them or break them down. So they need to get rid of those the same way that they need to get rid of the kind of fur or hair or feathers or whatever it is that they were eating. So they're able to cough those back up or cast those back up in those pellets. Hair and feathers and fish scales and all those kind of outer coverings are really hard to break down because they're made out of keratin. So our hair, our nails, these are all made out of keratin, which is a really, really strong protein and really resistant to acid. So that's why it's so hard for even some of these incredibly strong stomachs to break down those outer coverings. So not only do all owls make pellets, but all of our raptors do as well, which is pretty exciting. Someone was also asking how Whisper ended up in Minnesota. So very nicely spotted. Barn owls, like I said earlier, they're not usually here in Minnesota. We usually see some down in the southern part of the state, especially kind of in the big kind of open plains areas. But generally we don't seem to see too many of them. It generally is too cold. You can actually see on her legs here a little bit that she has some fluffy feathers, but right around kind of near her feet, they get really thin, really kind of short feathers. So she doesn't have those nice big fluffy built-in snow pants and snow boots that a lot of our kind of more local Minnesotan owls tend to need, that we see especially in the northern parts of the state. So it gets a little bit too chilly here for most barn owls. So we don't usually see them in our clinic. I think we've seen very few over the years. In the kind of 40 plus years, we really haven't seen too many barn owls. So not very many opportunities to have any educational barn owls that live here at the Raptor Center, since the few barn owls that we have seen have really not been, have been kind of sent back out into the wild. So because they're such an important species worldwide though, since they're found on every continent except for Antarctica, they're really important hunters across most of the world, we really wanted a chance to teach people about this really important global species. So this barn owl was actually intentionally raised by people in captivity. So she was not able to be released to the wild since she, kind of for permitting reasons, had been intentionally bred by people, so wasn't able to be released for that reason. And also wouldn't be able to live on her own anyway since she was raised by people. So she's not really sure exactly how to be an adult barn owl. So we were able to work with an organization to actually get this barn owl here at the Raptor Center so she could teach people about her species. So that's why she lives with us, kind of a couple of reasons, but that's why it was so important for us to have a barn owl to be able to teach people about, since again, they are a bird that you can find all around the world. This is something that I always think is really cool about birds, is not only can they travel really far distances, but they also have traveled really far distances in the past. So not only are we connected with other parts of the world through bird migration, but there's also past migrations that mean that we have birds like barn owls that live all around the world and we can all kind of see and recognize and relate to, which I think is really cool. You can go to somewhere halfway across the globe and see a bird that looks really similar to this one, living in the same types of habitats, those big open grasslands, oftentimes living, you can imagine, near things like barns or kind of nesting inside of caves or dead trees and things like that on the edges of farming fields and prairie grasslands. You can find them doing that all over the world, which I think is really fascinating. Since we have so many species here that are really, really specific to North America and really specific maybe even to the northern parts of North America, but here we have a bird who's able to be found all around the world, which is pretty cool. So that's why she lives with us. I'm gonna scroll back and just see if there are any other questions that I missed. Let me see if I can show you, since we're kind of closer to the end of our time, I wanna see if I can turn this a little bit so you can see a little bit of that facial disc that I was talking about. You can see how it's kind of open in the middle. She's tucked up that foot. I don't want to move this too close to her and startle her out of this nice kind of rest that she's doing. But you can see a little bit of that kind of inner lining there that usually is kind of hard to show people just because it's really kind of small in detail. I will say too, you can see especially, it's just splitting open even wider, hopefully you can see. It's a very relaxed, fluffy barn owl. Normally when we're looking at kind of bird body language, right, they can't really move their face muscles. We have really expressive faces, right? I'm making all sorts of weird expressions with my face and moving my hands around, doing all sorts of things that kind of tell you what I'm thinking and feeling, right? But birds can't really move their actual faces. They don't have mouths like we do. They're covered in feathers. It makes it kind of tricky. So we have to look at kind of what their feathers are doing for the most part, kind of how they're holding their posture and things like that. So a bird who is tucked a foot up, has kind of closed their eyes, is fully relaxing out all of those feathers, usually a sign of a bird that is not needing to think about flying away, escaping predators, or anything scary like that. So this is always really, really good to see a bird being so very kind of comfortable, relaxed. Not really paying too much attention to the book that I'm moving around and camera that I'm moving around and things like that, which is pretty cool. So thank you all so much for joining me and our resident barn owl here for reading time and possibly a little bit of nap time on the side. So thank you again so much, everyone, for joining us. As always, I put a link into the description of this video if you are interested in looking into your own up-close and personal sessions with any of the raptors that live here at the Raptor Center. You can check out that link that's in the description. You can also check us out on our website, theraptorcenter.org, or the rest of this Facebook page has a lot of great information about all the different online programs and things that we're doing right now. So definitely give that a check out. Otherwise, we will see you all next year for Reading with Raptors. I'm very excited. Here's one final fun fact. I know I'll say this again next week too, but for all of you who stuck around to the end, here's my fun fact about the new year. Since we don't know when each individual bird outside was hatched, right? You can look at a cardinal and you might be able to tell that it was hatched earlier this year, but we don't know what day, right? So ornithologists or bird scientists needed a way to figure out kind of how old is every bird, right? So the best way to do it was to just say, everyone turns 1 year older on the same day. And what better day than New Year's Day? So January 1st, 2021, you can look outside and any birds you see, you can wish happy hatch day to, since in the eyes of our bird scientists, they are all 1 year older. So every bird here, we kind of bumped their age up by 1 year on January 1st, even though they probably hatched in the spring for most of them, but it's an easy way to remember. So it'll be happy hatch day to every bird on New Year's Day. With that, we will see you all next year. Have a great and safe New Year's Eve, and we will see you all next week. Have a great day, everybody.